Hi, I'm Sumit Bose. Welcome to the Net Hero podcast. Remember, we're online, we're video and audio. You can download us, you can watch us on the Energy Live News YouTube channel, and of course, subscribe to the podcast with whatever podcast service you listen to. We want you to be involved in the podcast every week, so make sure that you get in touch. If you've got something you think should be talked about, you're doing something in net zero or ESG or sustainability, or you just think you've got a tale that others would be inspired by, then drop me a line, nethero@futurenetzero.com, and make sure that you listen in regularly. Without you as the audience and also our guests, the podcast is nothing. Now, on to this week's episode. Hello, I'm Sumit Bose. Welcome to another episode of the Net Hero podcast. Keep subscribing, keep listening, keep telling us what we should be doing, and make sure that you get involved. Now, today, I wanted to explore something that, if you're like me, you've kind of seen in movies, but we don't really have much of it in the UK. District heating. You know, you've seen the scenes in the New York, the steam coming out the subways, you know, where there's Ghostbusters animals and ghosts hiding in it. It's been this thing that's been really popular in America, particularly, but other parts of the world. But we have very little of it going on in the UK. New builds, new complexes are starting to do it. So I wanted to explore in this podcast what district heating really is, how they work, what their advantages are, and how we transition these things to more net zero. And I'm delighted to say, and I didn't even know there is an International District Energy Association, not IDEA, IDEA. And Rob Thornton is the CEO. Rob, thanks for joining us on the Net Hero podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Great to be here, Sumit. Thank you.
So let's start at the very beginning. What is sort of district heating?
Yeah, so actually it's district heating, district cooling. We call it collectively district energy, but we'll start with heating because that's where it began. So essentially it's a central plant or plants that produce steam or hot water and or chilled water, and sometimes power, electricity as well. And then that's connected to an underground thermal grid, a network of pipes that supply heat to connected buildings in a district, a city, a campus, an airport, healthcare, community. And so district heating is really nothing new. The Romans actually started it,
Wow.
Give them great credit. But it really began, I'd say, in the late 1800s in the US as a business when Thomas Edison, who we all know was the founder of General Electric and all the Edison, illuminating companies down in cities, they began as combined heat and power plants. So they would make heat, spin turbines to make power, electricity. And Edison realized he couldn't really make a profit with these investments only selling power. And when he went to sell power to customers in Manhattan, they said, well, I'll buy your electricity, but that means I have to shut down the dynamo I have in my basement that makes all my heat. So can you also provide me heat? And really, Edison realized, you know what? I need to. If I provide the heat as a byproduct, this whole investment will be more profitable.
And
so
I'm assuming, just to interrupt you, this was all coal, I assume they were burning.
Oh, initially it was.
Right.
So
Okay.
Coal stations downtown. And then that's a key point. District heating was really the very first environmental strategy for cities. Because at the time, every building had its own coal boiler, furnace, etc.
That's exactly what we had in the UK. Right? Every house has its own little coal fire, and that's been the model.
Hundreds, uncontrolled, etc. And that resulted in particulates in the air, very bad urban air. And the Great Smog of London was due in part to coal particulates in the air and an inversion, right? And so then district heating became an opportunity to centralize and remove hundreds of individual boiler plants from buildings and connect them to this network that was a more precisely controlled, a more efficient, a more reliable, and it also reduced the likelihood of fires in the city because it was, again, centralized and controlled, managed and operated by professionals. So district heating was really the first urban environmental safety, air quality, one of strategy, really in the world.
In terms of where the heat goes, so obviously
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
beginning, let's go back to then, your coal boiler and it's burning, you're creating steam and off it goes. The pipes then connected to buildings, and what would happen? The pipes would take steam or hot water, or would they then heat water in circulating the buildings to create heat through radiators? Is that how it all began?
That's largely how it happens. I mean, when you look at older buildings
Yeah,
in Manhattan or any of our U.S. cities, you'll see often steam radiators, and they're
yeah.
located often under the window. And generally, they're oversized because at the time, basically, you needed operable windows to get outside air because of other health issues. So steam was actually produced at the plant, just sent through the underground pipes, generally at like 120 pounds of pressure, right? So steam is a gas, it's moving through the pipes. When it enters the building, it's usually stepped down through a
Mhm.
pressure reducing valve to around an operating pressure of like 10 pounds. So when it's going through a building, it's at a lower pressure.
But
And then
it's
then
the
it,
steam that circulates through the building, not water. Then.
sometimes now
Okay.
in a so that would be like in an older brownstone, like
Yeah, yeah.
an older building, right? A dormitory, etc. As buildings modernize, basically the steam often gets converted to hot water and then is circulated,
There we go.
through coils in the
Yeah,
building
yeah.
or radiant. So it depends on the use in the building, but steam is still today used in autoclaves and to sterilize hospital equipment, and is used in process to make biopharmaceuticals, etc. So
Why
the
is it
steam,
so
yeah.
big? I mean, before we started
Mm,
recording, you said pretty
yeah.
much probably every major city in the US has it. Campuses have it. Universities have it. Why is it so popular there?
It makes economic sense. Yeah, and it's economies of scale. So rather than every building dedicating space and equipment and capital and manpower to producing and managing and operating and ensuring and providing water to equipment, individual buildings, by consolidating at a central plant, you can supply energy to 100 buildings, through one central plant. And so, particularly in a college university campus, instead of dedicating space, valuable leasable space in the building to equipment, not only in the building, but on top of the building.
Right. Yeah.
If you have a boiler or a chiller plant where you're making air conditioning in your building, you've got to release the heat through cooling towers on the roof. Guess what, Sumit? That's some of the most valuable
Yeah. Of
real
course it is.
estate
Yeah.
anywhere, right? So one of our active members is in Dubai, very large district cooling network. There's two hotels nearly side by side. One has a roof full of condensers, making noise,
Yeah. The
rejecting
classic.
heat.
The classic
The
shot. Yeah.
other,
Yeah.
the other has a tennis court,
A
a
roof garden.
restaurant.
Yeah.
Which building's more
There
valuable?
you
Which
go.
one would you
Yeah.
rather have? And so that's really, district energy is an economic and moreover efficient. So instead of, think of it like every building has, when you select a vehicle, for your family for a year, oh, we're going to take a summer vacation, we're going to need an SUV
Mm.
to put everybody in all our goods. But that's 2 weeks a year, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you got to buy that unit to support that period of time, right? That's what happens when buildings do it themselves. They overinvest in equipment. It's oversized. It's ultimately inefficient most of the year. And so when you kind of aggregate and scale that back, you get efficiencies at the central plant. And then the customers are really taking what they need, not what they have to have. So there's a whole range of advantages
Yeah.
to district energy.
So right now, I mean, as I said, I haven't been to New York for years, and I stayed in a hotel, I can't remember it. But if you go to an average apartment in any American city, right? I walk in and I've got my apartment that's being heated generally by a district, right? So do I have control of my heat, or is it basically what they've set at the plant? Your apartment's going to be 25 degrees all the year round, Sumit.
No, if it's no, today you would have control. You know, you
Right.
would have a
But I
thermostat,
assume the
and
old days
yeah.
you didn't. It was kind of what came out.
Well, that's actually improved quite a bit in the last
Wow.
20 years too, right? So controls are much less expensive to install. They're much
Because
easier to
that's always the
operate.
big problem, isn't it?
Right.
Like, everyone
Yeah.
has different. We
Overheating.
have it in our office. Some of the
Yep.
guys want the air conditioning full blast, others are freezing. So you've got to
Right.
find, and that's why people
Right.
say, if you have an apartment block, your next door neighbor likes it at 20 degrees, you like it at 25, and
Right.
yet you're being served, 27 for all of you or whatever. So there is an
Yeah.
element of control now, is there?
Absolutely. And moreover, certainly residential, and then in commercial office space too. When you look at a building, if it is standing alone, and it's a tower, in the morning when the sun hits it from the
Yeah,
east and then the
yeah.
south, that side of the building, kind of warms up first, and that's going to need cooling. Most then the other perimeter, may actually need heating. So systems in buildings now are, very capable of adjusting, modulating, etc.
I'm
Here's
impressed.
another less understood
Yeah.
but new sort of thing. One of the areas that generates huge amounts of heat are data centers, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's a
Servers are
big issue.
making heat
We've had people on about that. Yeah, absolutely.
24/7.
Yeah.
Turns out that heat is low-grade heat, but Amazon headquarters in Seattle, they have a data center that serves their campus. It's a 4-building campus. That data center provides all the heating for the other 3 buildings, 4 million square feet. So what's happened in the last, I'd say, 2 decades is there's been a recognition that energy is not electricity, and electricity is not energy. Really, energy is both heating, cooling, and electricity. And in the EU, more than 50% of primary energy is used for heating and cooling buildings. It's not just
Oh
electricity.
yeah, you've hit the topic that always grates. It's very interesting. This point that you've raised is the one that perhaps maybe you've been ahead of it in the US, because we've generally seen our systems in the UK as kind of electricity and gas, right? And most people
Right.
have cooked with gas and heated our houses with gas, and we've used electricity for everything else. Would you say that America has always been slightly different in that sense, that because from the Edison days, the power and the heat are intrinsically involved? Have these district sort of heating systems, have they made the ability for people to see energy slightly different to what we probably see it over here compared to what you see it over there?
Well, it really depends where your footprint is. I'd say in cities, there's a recognition and of the advantages of district energy, combined heat and power, district heating. So where you have a cluster or a density, a vertical density, I think in the U.S., I think both, architects and engineers and, developers, property owners, government, I think people, are getting it. They get it. Where America, if you look out in the suburbs where the density isn't there, and homes are spread apart, etc., there isn't really the economic
That's
advantage
exactly
of
what I was going to say.
infrastructure.
Yeah, the idea of the kind of lovely suburban America. What do they have there? Do you have district heating, or is it more individual
No,
based?
generally not.
No,
But
okay.
what we're beginning to see though in communities, particularly like New Build you mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
in Canada near Toronto, there's a community that is being built with a district energy network, and so there'll be 250 individual homes on and each home will have a heat pump, and they'll be connected to a thermal loop. It's more of an ambient loop, and it turns out that people want to own and live in buildings that are prepared for a more sustainable future, designed for lower carbon footprint, have a greater resiliency, maybe aren't as prone to interruption when the wires are impaired or
yeah,
the
yeah.
brownouts, etc. So we're starting to see where there's cluster opportunity, and in some aggregation scale, district energy is really being, I think, more carefully evaluated and often implemented.
How long are you an engineer? What's your background?
No, I'm son of an engineer. I went to college at Tufts University. I've grown up in the industry. I've been in district energy since 1987, but I've been in the energy industry my whole career.
Right.
It started for me, Sumit. I wanted to stay in Boston for the summer. I was a student. I went to the financial aid office. I said, "Hey, do you have any internships?"
You want to stay in the summer for the ladies in the
for
summer.
the fun. Well, it was Boston, right? 1978. It was Moral Equivalent of War. They sent me to a little think tank, the Energy Policy Research Institute. I showed up. Hi, I'm from Tufts. Here, you do the greenhouse effect.
Right.
So 1978, second oil embargo. Oh, Jimmy Carter's in the White House.
Yeah.
Moral equivalent of war. It turns out I had an epiphany that not only was our energy policy really bad, but we had a huge challenge in terms of climate change or the greenhouse effect. And it's been my pursuit, my career, really ever since that moment.
How long has IDAA been going? I mean, because the international part of it, what you've said is brilliant, and I think most of us who are listening, and it is principally a UK audience, totally get district heating in the US. But you are an international organization. I think you're in 25
Correct.
countries, right?
28, yes.
28 countries, right. So where are the other places where this has been going on for a long time? Let's ignore Canada, because I assume Canada's probably the same. But around Europe, is it big? Is it in the Far East, in India? Is it in parts of China? Where would you say you're seeing this?
Yes, and yes.
Right.
District energy is ubiquitous globally. We're seeing huge investment happening in China, as they're moving carbon out of the central city. Certainly Europe, Germany, France, Paris has a massive, largely integrated district energy network.
God, I didn't even know that. Wow.
They provide cooling to the Louvre from the Seine.
Oh, wow.
And there's geothermal. The Paris energy network is brilliant.
Huh.
It deploys all sorts of technologies, including recovering heat from waste incineration. Instead of going to landfill, it's useful heat, useful energy. Copenhagen, 98% of the buildings in Copenhagen are on district heating. 60% of that heat is from waste to energy or combined heat and power. Heat recovered from electric generating stations. Denmark is Sweden. The Scandinavian countries,
of course,
really
pretty good,
very, they really lead the pack. Germany.
And you said a bit about the Middle East earlier. So I assume it's about cooling there, I assume, is it?
Yes, absolutely correct. Yes. So Abu Dhabi, Dubai, the United Arab Emirates is where we have very strong footprint. The industry has blossomed as Dubai, has become sort of Manhattan in a couple of decades. Most of that is on district cooling now. You see the Burj Al Arab, all of those kind of clustered communities are on district cooling. The reason being, if they were to put all of that space on the electric utility industry, the grid would have to be 3 times the size. I mean, so the infrastructure requirements to air condition, 70% of the electricity produced in UAE is used for air conditioning. And so they needed, out of a strategy, to have a more sustainable, lower carbon, more resilient cooling alternative. And district cooling has been the default in Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
I'm going to hit you now with what have we been doing in the UK? It ain't good, is it?
No. I actually, don't beat yourself up. You guys, collectively, the Greater London Authority, I'd say 12, 15 years ago, you undertook a heat mapping initiative in 2010, which was really clever because basically...
we've seen newer builds, but I mean, historically, we've been very poor at it, haven't we?
Well...
Come on, again, Rob, you can be honest.
No, I mean, I think... I think you've had an awakening. I think you're starting to realize that heat rejected into the rivers or the sky, is useful, and maybe if there's a way we can recapture that and put it to use. But it's not easy to put that infrastructure in place.
And that's what I was going to say to you. I think everything you've said is brilliant, and I get it. And I get it where cities were built that way, American cities. And here we have in the UK, we're building new, as I said, new housing where maybe there's a plant nearby or the combined heat and power. But you cannot retrofit district heating. You
No, you
can't
can.
dig up the cities, can you? So
No, you
is this
can.
is can you?
Yeah, oh, sure, yes. I mean,
Wow.
it's not for the faint of heart. Uh, but uh, but I was meeting with one of our member systems
Right.
just the other day in Boston.
Okay.
They own and operate I think 17 systems in 11 cities. And in the past year and a half, they've put over 1.5 miles of new pipe in the city of Boston. Now, but I mean, Boston isn't as dense as Manhattan. I'll give you that.
But
But
you still got to dig up the streets and annoy everyone.
well, you have to do it, efficiently, collectively. You have to get in and get out.
Uh-huh.
You can't sort of leave it unpaved for weeks at a time. But there is a way. Here's another. I
So
think.
sorry,
Yeah,
I want to
it can
interrupt
be
because
done. Yeah.
I do love what you're saying, but I just can't imagine a retrofit option for a city. Let's take a city like, I don't know, Birmingham or Manchester, a smaller city in the UK, or even Cardiff, to go and say, actually, let's go and retrofit now district heating. It would just, people
Uh,
would just go bonkers.
Well, I mean, you don't blanket it, you don't cover it overnight.
Right.
You can do it in nodes, right? So you connect to like a community housing or a complex, right? That's step one, and then maybe a few blocks away you connect another. So there's a way to Lego this, sort of build Jenga this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do building blocks.
Yeah.
You don't snap your fingers and get there overnight.
No.
This is since 1990 in North America, we've built, I think, nearly 65 downtown district cooling systems. And district cooling, it takes a larger pipe, two of them, in fact. And because there's less heat transferred, you have to move more water. So in Cleveland, for instance, we built a district cooling system, put it in the city, put two 42-inch pipes, so that's I
Enormous.
should know it. I should know it in meters, but
Yeah.
two trunks right down the center. And not only that, we had to get across an intersection on a weekend before the Monday night football game took place. So yes,
Maybe you just got better diggers and better workmen
well,
in
you got
the
to be smart
yes.
about it. Yeah, so it can be done in all of Dubai. It's easier, obviously.
No, in newer cities.
Greenfield.
I get it.
Right.
Is it before we end, I want to cover a couple of things. So
Yeah.
is this an option for developing nations? So because the other thing that always worries me about these things, these are big infrastructure projects and they cost a lot. Most states won't be able to do it, but obviously states can allow the legislative market to be right for private companies to do it. So let's take, I don't know, Brazil or Africa or places like that. Are you seeing any traction where, in developing nations, people are going, actually, we're going to start putting in district heating?
So we're actually going to Colombia
Right.
in a couple of weeks, and Colombia, Chile, so Latin America, where the population is, I think, denser in
Yeah,
cities. They
absolutely.
are looking to retrofit, and depending on the climate, Chile has a need for both heating and cooling.
Yeah.
Colombia maybe more cooling,
Mhm.
centric. So Latin America for certain. I think in the other locales, it does require a certain aggregation, kind of a cluster scale to make the economics work. You can't just put pipe in the ground and hope people, kind of connect.
Exactly. You've got to have a business case, and it's a big
Yes, yeah.
investment for a company privately to do it, isn't it?
Well, yes, but it turns out that those investments generate terrific yield. The city of Toronto was an investor in district cooling. They were a partner in a network that basically put not only a water line out into Lake Ontario, but used the cold of Lake Ontario to air condition downtown Toronto. It was
So is it
jointly owned by.
So it's a public
privately owned
partner.
now.
Okay, right.
Well, it was initially, right? So the
Right.
city and the Ontario Pension Fund were the sort of the co-owners during that phase of development. The city of Toronto decided to sell their share, and then the pension fund said, "Okay, we'll go along." And the city generated a return on capital of over $168 million Canadian.
Wow.
So that investment actually, it produced a return that the city could then use, a capital gain for other infrastructure needs. Now,
Understood. Yeah.
so cities can play a role. They can be an owner. They certainly can support, facilitate, and encourage private investment. It's not a district energy works best when there's both maybe a more carrot than stick.
Understood.
But
are there the companies out there willing to invest? So they're
absolutely,
yeah, that's out there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Huge turnover in our space right now.
Before we go, I like it, right? You've sold me. I'm going to go and dig up my neighborhood now and stick some pipes in. Right? But in all seriousness, how do you start to do the thing that's really all this about? Decarbonize that. So we talked right at the beginning, the initial firing of these boilers was coal. So what has the actual district heating industry done to clean up its act and its emissions and to make sure it recaptures much heat, or it's cutting away from fossil fuels to actually generate the thermal power in the first place? What are you doing?
Well, so we're not wasting the heat that's used to make power. We're using it, right? So the efficiency of our plants typically is in the 70, 80, even 85% of the fuel consumed to make power, heat, and cooling is useful energy. So that displaces downstream carbon emissions from multiple boilers and equipment. And it turns out when you already have the scale, now you can plug in different technologies. For instance, at Princeton University, they're currently punching boreholes to build a geo-exchange network, right? So they're converting the steam system to use hot water, but they have a chilled water network. So there's a wholesale change happening there. One of our members in Chicago, Centrio, has five chilled water plants downtown. They make ice at night. They buy in fact, it's a carbon-free district cooling system in downtown Chicago, the third largest city in our country. They buy nuclear power at night. They make millions of pounds of ice. They store it in vast tanks in their chilled water plants. There's a network that connects 120 buildings, 60 million square feet. So during the day, when the grid is really impaired, they're getting their cooling from the ice battery that was made the night before, and they're avoiding the dirty power, that basically comes on stream to support the air conditioning load. That I made that more complicated.
No, I get what you're saying, but is it fair to say still a lot of the initial power is still coming from things like gas and fossil fuels?
So our members, I think probably 70% of the heat generated, heat power and cooling generated is still on natural gas.
Okay.
However, when you look at the marginal, so a number of our systems, what they do is, they have the option to make their own power, heat, and cooling. And then they're buying power from the grid real time, right? And so they're checking the grid on a 15-minute interval. Is the grid cleaner electricity than I can make?
Okay,
is it lower carbon? Right.
Okay.
And so they can basically arbitrage and then make a decision, price and carbon, which is the cleaner, electrons. What's the cleaner? And that's happening right now. And again, that happens because you have the scale of a network and a thermal grid that gives you that optionality that individual buildings really can't, they're just in the retail electric market. Our members are at the wholesale power market. When the offshore wind is available, they're going to be running heat pumps. And it turns out, Sumit, that when you use a large heat pump to make heating and cooling for a campus or a city, not only do you make heat, but you cool the river.
Yeah.
So one of our members is putting a big heat pump in the.
So you're saying there's loads of ancillary new technologies that are coming around.
That's great for the fish in Seattle. It's going to be a huge benefit.
I think it's really interesting because
there's a lot of layers to this.
Yeah, there is. And I think that the thing is with this whole thing, as I said, it's a fairly alien concept for us here in the UK, but definitely one that's been growing there. I've been very, very, very fascinated by our conversation.
Thank you.
Is your hope that district heating continues to become one of the levers we can pull globally to try and get us to reduce our emissions?
I think it's critical. I think it's essential. And, we're now a planet of 8.1 billion people. 55% live in cities. There'll be 6 billion people living in cities by 2050. We have to solve for cities. That's really where 70% of the, greenhouse gases occur. And so, I liken it like, so you can solve for a whole bunch of bananas, right? A stalk of bananas, or one banana at a time. We're trying to address it a bunch of bananas at a time, a city at a time, or at least a district at a time. Maybe not all of London.
No, I get it. I get it.
Thames Way, et cetera, et cetera. So it's amazing what our members really help each other. They support each other. There's such technical peer exchange. Yes, there's competition, but basically, there's such collegial collaboration, problem solving, innovation. It's an exciting space, and I've been in it now for 40 years. I'll tell you what.
You're still very enthused after 40 years.
It's a great place to make a difference, and really, we're charged. We really see an important future for all of us.
Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Do check out IDEA and have a look at district heating. And if you've got a story to tell, then come on to the Net Hero podcast, just like Rob did, because we're very keen to explore all the ways we can try and cut our carbon. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, like us, do all the things that people do, especially young people, do the clicking and all that stuff. I'll catch you very soon. See you soon.
You've been listening to the Net Hero podcast with Sumit Bose from Future Net Zero. Visit our platform for all things net zero. And if you or your business is doing great things on the path to net zero and want to be featured on the podcast, email nethero@futurenetzero.com. Follow us on social media. futurenetzero.com. Better business, better planet.